Today I look at a blast from the past in a sense, pure psychics, sometimes referred to as Banish Psychic. In the past, Banish Psychics took on many forms with various hybridizations or techs. In this build, I prefer to keep the deck as pure psychic as possible, at least in the main deck. So, with the introduction out of the way, it's time to start. For the analysis, the build itself will be discussed, instead of simply viewing all possible options due to time constraints. The first card should be expected by anyone familiar with Banish Psychics: 3 copies of Serene Psychic Witch. Witch is one of the members of the triumvirate of searchers for psychic decks that do not require destruction as a result of battle to receive its search effect, thus increasing versatility. The chief advantage of Witch is that it can search a psychic monster from the deck and special summon it during the next standby phase makes Witch incredibly valuable. The fact that she is searchable via emergency teleport makes her all the better. However, it is important to note that this delay is a double-edged sword. The positive of the delay is that it is highly probable that the searched monster will be available to aid playmaking during the next turn. The negative is that it is not available to protect during the opponent's turn. Also, a slight disadvantage to this card is that its search is basically reserved for during the opponent's turn because the card hits the field during the next standby phase, not during your next standby phase. A vast majority of the time, Witch will either be putting Esper Girl on the field to net a possible +1 through her effect, or a hushed Psychic Cleric to set up a secondary play. The second member of the triumvirate, Silent Psychic Wizard, is probably the least commonly run of the 3, but I like him at 2 copies. The advantage of Wizard is that he specializes in recycling cards like Serene Witch and Esper Girl from the graveyard, in addition to being the big level 4 brute at 1900 attack. Unlike Witch, Wizard gets its effect when removed from the field and sent to the graveyard, instead of needing to be destroyed, which makes it a key element in combo strings, largely involving synchro plays. The disadvantage of Wizard is it demands a normal summons to use its effect, and a graveyard target, so he has trouble starting the first combo string on the first turn. Outside of that, though, Wizard is definitely a solid choice in my opinion and experience. The final member of the Search Triumvirate is Hushed Psychic Cleric. With Witch handling the deck, and Wizard handling the graveyard, it is not surprising that Cleric is responsible for the hand, as well as overlapping Wizard's coverage of the graveyard. Basically, while its discard requirement can be annoying, Cleric is one of the best answers to utilizing combo pieces that are in the hand by dumping them from the hand to the graveyard, then targeting them in the graveyard. Note that at least one psychic monster must exist in the graveyard to legally discard and graveyard target the same psychic. The big advantage of Cleric is similar to Wizard in that it receives its effect when leaving the field to the graveyard, making combo plays immediately possible. The disadvantage is the required discard, which makes it a questionable top deck. Fortunately, it does not require a monster discard, just any discard. Finally, its 2100 defense is immediately relevant when normal summoned, because it switches itself to defense mode. I run 2 due to the discard cost. With the Search Triumvirate taken care of, and all of them being non-tuners, the next step is to determine which psychic tuners should be run in consort. First, what tuners don't make the cut? Psychic Commander was once a popular choice, but in the current meta and prospective future meta, it does not produce enough positives to be worthy of running anymore. Overall, I want to like Mental Seeker more because not only can you remove the most valid threat over the next 3 cards, you get information. However, Seeker comes off as too much of a frontrunner card in that its effect is best when you're already winning. Now, what about those lucky tuners that did make the cut? 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit for its dual medium card effect destruction. I think most people forget that Ogre can destroy cards from the field in reaction in addition to from the hand, because Ogre is more often in the hand than on the field. In this deck, though, Ogre will see the field much more often than most other decks. Its 1800 defense is also meaningful, typically forcing opponents to go to higher level monsters or XZs to get over it. While Krebons is seemingly fallen out of favor for a number of players, I still like running 1 copy, for it is searchable via multiple means, and its attack negation effect can be critical at times. Also, being a level 2 tuner is typically a boon in this deck. I like running 2 copies of Esper Girl, for she is the major draw plus engine of the deck. Some people might argue that 1 copy is better, for drawing Esper Girl is rarely good, but if she is drawn, that is what Cleric is for, among other things. Also, the way this deck is constructed, 2 copies work better than 1, and when both Esper Girls get involved in a combo play, the advantage can really pile up. Most of the time, though, Esper Girl will be ushered from the deck to the Banish Zone and then to the field by the effect of Serene Psychic Witch. I run 1 copy of Psychic Jumper as the so-called creature swap on legs. The advantage of Jumper is that you actually get to select what monster to take from the opponent. The major disadvantage of Jumper is that it affects targets, unlike Creature Swap, so no Dark Destroyer for you, or any Monarchs with March on the field, and it requires another Psychic monster to give to the opponent. However, despite these limitations, Jumper can have its moments, and due to its searchability, 1 copy is appropriate in my opinion. Recover is valuable in this particular build as a level 1 tuner with the possibility of an innate special summons from the graveyard. I run 1 copy. With the direct triumvirate and tuners now addressed, what other psychics join the fray? Due to the extreme combination nature of this deck, I like running 2 copies of Overdrive Teleporter because of its no special summon condition. The main problem I've had with running only 1 copy is I don't see it enough. If Overdrive hits the field, though, and is allowed to get its effect off, it can start some huge combo strings that will make some rather nasty boards. I run 1 copy of Risebell the Star Adjuster, due to its level change effect, opening the door to higher level synchros to create more dangerous boards. For while level 4, 5, and 6 synchros are good for producing advantage, getting to the level 7 pluses is needed to get over most meta decks, and a lot of rogue decks. Closing out the Psychic monsters, I run 1 copy of DD Telepon as my level 2 non-tuner to help consistency in synchro playmaking, and it provides some additional flexibility with respect to opponent end-phase emergency teleport activation, which will trigger its effect to collect a starting combo piece, although this effect is typically not used. For the rest of the monsters, I run 1 copy of Glow Bulb because any self-respecting synchrocentric deck needs to run 1 copy. 1 copy of Performage Trick Clown for combination potential, especially as a discard target with Cleric, and 1 copy of my, combo flyer, Beast of the Pharaoh. While it is no guarantee, when this guy goes off, he really goes off. Note that I do not run Time Escaper solely because of Solemn Strike. If Fiendish Chain and Breakthrough Skill were still used as consistently as they were in the past to negate monster effects, then Time Escaper would still be more effective as a possibility to run in this deck, but not really in a world where the opponent is much more likely to run 3 Solemn Strikes than any Breakthrough Skills or Fiendish Chains. For the spells, I don't run Regeki solely because I don't have room, but with the level of synchro frequency and combo nature of this deck, 1 Soul Charge is definitely worth running. Unsurprisingly, I run the 2 allowable copies of Emergency Teleport, for obvious reasons. With Glow Up Bulb and the potential usefulness of some graveyard priming to start combos, I like running 1 copy of Foolish Burial, 1 copy of Upstart Goblin, and 1 copy of One Day of Peace to evade OTK pushes and increase draw power. Those OTK pushes can happen against this deck because it typically has a slow first turn when using Serene Psychic Witch. While some certainly would disagree, I like running 2 copies of Brain Research Lab because that second normal summons is incredibly helpful for setting off combinations, in addition to absorbing life point costs associated with various psychic card effects. Overall, for me, it really comes down to the fact that most of the time when I'm not running Research Lab, I'm left wondering why I'm not running it, and when I do run it, there are not a lot of times when I grumble about running it. Also, I run 1 copy of Terraforming for searching purposes, and it can be a discard target for Cleric's effect. Closing out the spells, I run 1 copy of Telekinetic Powerwell, which can also help string together quality combinations, especially in combination with Beast of the Pharaoh. For the traps, I run 1 copy of Torrential Tribute to help aid triggering Serene Witch's effect, as well as control OTK rushes, and 1 copy of Vanity's Emptiness for obvious reasons. I run 2 copies of Psychic Overload as an additional advantage engine, because getting 3 Psychics into the graveyard with this deck is not hard at all, and Overload can help recycle the Psychic Synchros you choose to run as well. Finally, I run 2 copies of Oasis of the Dragon Soul because defense is preferred over offense when summoning from the graveyard for combos, as sometimes that summons needs to occur during the opponent's turn, whether you're summoning something like Witch or you're just summoning something for defensive purposes to survive for the next turn. Also, I run 2 copies of Drowning Mirror Force, for your play can definitely get stopped with the amount of negators that exist in the game now, and you don't want to have your field just sitting there exposed for an OTK. Mind Over Matter is another option for this deck, but I find the biggest problem with Mind Over Matter is most of the time it needs to activate during the opponent's turn, which can screw with your Wizard or Cleric combos and cannot trigger Witch because it tributes, not destroys. Note that I do not run Twin Twisters in this deck because I find that the deck cannot afford the discard cost. If you find yourself running into a lot of back row heavy decks, the old standby MST can do a good job. For this deck, the extra deck probably will make or break the overall success level of the deck because of the combo potential, as it needs a suitable number of game enders and advantage creators. My extra deck is as followed: 1 Leo, the Keeper of the Sacred Tree. It's largely between this card and Stardust Warrior, and I just seem to get more mileage out of Leo. 1 Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss. Great card for this deck because of its negation and tuner summoning effect, allowing the reuse of Ogre over and over again from the graveyard. 1 Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier. 1 Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend. 1 PSY-Framelord Omega. 1 Ancient Pixie Dragon, offers another means to get Abyss on the field outside of Scarlight, and can net a few pluses due to the presence of Research Lab. 2 HTMS Psyhemoth, allows for the removal of incredibly annoying monsters if the higher level plays are not available. 2 Stardust Charge Warriors, easy to summon, advantage producer. 1 TG Hyper Librarian, standard for most synchro decks. 1 Armades, Keeper of the Boundaries, deal with Burning Abyss and some of the lower Cosmo monsters. 1 Naturia Beast, most of the key elements involved in synchro summoning in this deck are Earth. 1 Old Etsy Hastor, a rather underrated card that can stop most monsters in its tracks. And 1 Armory Arm. Overall, while Banish Psychic is still a fun and brainy deck to play, the sad reality is that in my experience its level of competitiveness is questionable solely because the game has just become too fast for the deck. The deck is just too reactionary for the general speed of the modern deck. It commonly needs a turn to set up before it can explode, because Serene typically just has to sit there on the field and get destroyed in some way. In the past, that turn was widely available. Now, that turn is not widely available. Realistically, it is unlikely that General Psychics will receive any targeted support in the future either, so the only way this deck becomes significantly competitive again is the release of a quality generic card that can get the job done. It's sad, but it seems to be that's the case. Well, that is my Banish Psychic deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.